So during the Spanish fight against the Moors to retake the Iberian Peninsula, there was this old man. He wanted a discreet way to warn the Spanish that the Moors were on their way. And so the way he found to do this was that in order to warn the Spanish about Moorish activity in the area, he would take a cow's head and mount it on a pole where it could be seen from the roads, right? And after the battle was won, the Spanish royal family gave him a title, cabeza de vaca, the head of the cow, right? Sounds silly to us, but it was a pretty common thing, right? You would get a title based on your performance in a war when you got a royal title. So those of you who think back to like Game of Thrones, right? Bronn of the Blackwater, right? Because he got his knighthood based on his actions at the Battle of Blackwater, right? It's the same kind of thing in actual history. So cabeza de vaca, right? His descendant went forth with the colonizers to North America. Alvar Nuñez, cabeza de vaca. Alvar Nuñez is one of the great exploratory figures of early American history, and a bunch of people have just never heard of him. So I'll tell you a little bit about him. The story starts with a hurricane. Alvar Nuñez was part of an expedition that was traveling in the Gulf of Mexico. Like most expeditions of the Spanish colonizers, they were searching for gold, right? And other precious metals, mainly gold. There was also cibola they were looking for, which goes back to gold. They wanted riches, is the point. They wanted to take riches from the heathen Indians, killing them and assimilating them and enslaving them and taking their stuff, right? We all know that part of history. Horrible things they were doing, right? Well, the hurricane comes in, devastates the ships, right? So now we got a bunch of survivors on rafts. Storms come in again, destroy the rafts. Alvar Nuñez wakes up. He's been captured by some of the native population. Now, the indigenous peoples of the Americas, many of them did practice things like slavery. It's not the way that we tend to think of it in the Western world. There's a big problem with the way slavery is taught, especially in the United States. That basically, like, all slavery is equated with the U.S.'s system of race-based chattel slavery. And that's just not the way things worked in the ancient world. Slavery did exist. It has existed pretty much throughout all of human history. But that race-based chattel slavery was a fairly unique thing to the Americas, right? Other places, slavery could be a temporary thing, or children of slaves could work their way into citizenship. Slavery was based on things like ethnicity, or being on the losing side of a war, or even sometimes as like retribution for a crime committed against one tribe by another, right? Slavery is a very long and complicated thing. He was a slave of the indigenous people who caught him. And one of the things they used him for was running between the other tribes, using him for trade, like a merchant, right? And he performed this task. While he did, he learned the language and culture. Well, eventually, after years, he made his escape, right? Now, this is right around Florida, where he was captured, right? In the Mississippi area. Florida, Louisiana, all that area. Now, We're pretty sure it's right in the like Louisiana and Texas joint, but we don't know 100% for sure where he was. What we do know is that he traveled north and west, right? While traveling north and west, he met up with a couple of his compatriots, right? One, this is where it becomes almost like a movie, right? This is like the setup for a film. One of his compatriots from the expedition was Spanish nobleman. The other, a Moorish slave, right? You can look up this Moorish slave. He's got his own amazing story. You can look him up a few different names. He went by Estebanico, Mustafa the Moor, Esteban the Black. Basically, Black Steve is the guy. Esteban was important to this journey because he had a real gift for languages. He became their communicator, their translator, right? So they traveled throughout the Americas, and they were the first Europeans to see things like buffalo, right? The North American species of deer, things like that. They traveled through what would eventually become the Louisiana Purchase before the French were there, and before the U.S. existed, let alone bought it, right? During all of this time, Alvar Nuñez was recording things in his mind. He was keeping track of the things he saw, the people he saw, right? And while they were doing this, they kept making their way further west and eventually started moving south. They were following the trail of artifacts they knew to be Spanish, that had eventually been, traded upwards and around the continent. So in making these trades, they eventually made their way back to Mexico. And eventually they were able to meet up with Spanish authorities who had long presumed they were dead, right? So then they each meet their own fate. The first thing that happens, that Spanish nobleman that was traveling with them, he starts telling tall tales about how the indigenous people would give him like magic potions that made him fuck like a donkey and worshipped him as a god. Probably all bullshit, right? Esteban, facing becoming a slave again, figured he had a good time relating to the natives. He was good at communicating with them. He had a good rapport with them. So he hatched his own plan. He told the Spanish that while we were on our travels, I saw Cibola, the city of gold, and I can lead you there, and am willing to lead you there. The only caveat is I have to be a free man to do so. There are a few different stories about how he died. The first is that he made a break for it and the Spanish killed him. The second is that he misinterpreted some of the cultural norms of one of the tribe they were staying with, and he was killed by them. And the third, perhaps the most interesting to some, is that a little backstory. It was in all of the accounts from their travels, it was noted that the indigenous population were pretty much in awe of Esteban's extremely dark skin. And as such, there were more than one occasion he was asked to give his genetic material to the tribe, right? So this third description of how he died is basically that he assumed that that's what was wanted of him, and when he made the attempt, he was killed for going after their women. No one knows for sure. There are actually a group in Mexico right now. They call themselves the Sons of Esteban, or Children of Esteban, and they claim to be the descendants of these relations of him, and They are a pretty interesting read if you ever get the chance to them. Alvar Nuñez, meanwhile, documented everything he saw in Letters to the King. So whenever you're thinking about early American explorers, Lewis and Clark always get all of the press, but long before Lewis and Clark were even born, long before there was a United States, Alvar Nuñez was already going across the continent, writing down what he saw. And it's a really amazing story. I've only given you the basis of details. There are a couple of films on the subject. If you know Spanish or don't mind subtitles, they're really good movies. And there is Alvar Nuñez's own writings that you can always check out, as well as a few different books on the subject that apply what we know from anthropology and history to what he wrote, contrasting the two, comparing the two. So look up Alvar Nuñez if you get a chance. It's an amazing story and really important, I think, to the history of the United States and the history of Mexico, since we are built on colonization and genocide. This is an early account from that, and an early account from a man who came to view the indigenous population as people, which was fairly rare idea for the Spanish at the time. So go ahead and give that a check out. Remember to subscribe if you like what you see. Get that bell notification icon so that you get the email whenever I post a new video. Or spread this to your friends if you think they'd be interested. Probably going to do more history videos. I asked for suggestions in my last posted video, and one of them was me telling history stories. That's from a personal friend who knows it's something I enjoy and likes listening to them. So I might do more of that, just because this was a good talk, even though it's only been about 10 minutes. I'll see you guys later. Thanks. Bye.